everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and now that my two obligatory informative videos are done for the day, it's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And I had a lot of requests for me to cover AlphaDestiny's video, or my thoughts on it, on his video about what he learned from bench press and pull-up specialization. Well, I did the bench press video separately because they're really two separate topics, two separate videos. That he kind of combined into one, so I'm just going to kind of discuss the pull-ups today and give my thoughts on this. Let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skill on my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this because some of this is important to understand. And it's like I said before, Alex doesn't seem to grasp the concept because he got so tied up in the whole west side barbell conjugate method and not fully understanding it before implementing it, that he doesn't actually understand the difference between an assistance exercise and an accessory exercise. And that was really, really obvious with his video he did about carryover. And then it kind of shows through again here. So I want to jump into that in a minute. But what I want to state up front, he does feel that the weighted pull-up is an amazing upper body exercise. I happen to agree with that. I happen to agree with all that. So even though I don't like Alex, we don't get along, we will never be friends, needless to say. And that has to do with some very personal stuff that happened. I cannot be this man's friend. I cannot be his friend, ever. And that's just the reality of it. It's the reality of it. But I always give credit where credit is due. I give credit where credit is due. And this is a point we're going to agree upon. The weighted pull-up is probably one of the best upper body exercises you could possibly do. You need to do them. You need to get strong at them. You will not regret it. You will not regret it because the weighted pull-up adds a tremendous amount of size and strength to your entire upper body. It's not just a lat exercise. It's not just a lat exercise. Done correctly, it will build your lats, your traps, your rear delts, your biceps, brachialis. It can help with your forearms, your grip, your abs. It's a good core exercise, in addition to the fact that if you do the full range of motion, it's a long head of the tricep and upper chest exercise. That's tough to beat. When you look at all the musculature involved in it, it becomes very obvious that this is one of the most amazing upper body exercises ever. Do them, and I agree with him. It is an exercise that it would be a good idea for people to do a lot of. You know, and that was kind of one of the things that people need to look at. He would basically address guys like me and act like we only cared about the squat, bench, deadlift. He tried to pull that a lot when I've always said that a lot of your upper back pulling and middle back pulling is actually extremely important, even for a power lifter. If nothing else, giving you a more stable platform, lower injury risk, everything else. So the weighted pull-up is an exercise that I'm going to recommend, and I actually will appreciate the fact that he recommends and puts an emphasis on it, because most of you out there, most of the guys out there who are chasing size and everything else, they need to understand it's exercises like this that will make you big, right? An exercise like this will do a hell of a lot more for you than some cable rows will. Let's just be realistic here. It will. It absolutely will. So the other point we need to go to with all of this, he wanted to talk about carryover, that he was surprised that it had carryover to his pulls. And it doesn't surprise me. And that was the thing that he had said. He said, I was surprised. I mean, a lot of you guys maybe knew it, but I didn't know it. Well, yeah, it's because Alex is still new to training, and he doesn't understand carryover biomechanics, all of that. He doesn't have a good grasp of it yet. He just doesn't have enough training experience to fully grasp these things. And some of the carryover that he saw has to do with the fact that he does partials and he's short. And I'm going to get into that in a minute. There's a reason some exercises will have different carryover than they will have to other people. There'll be a different carryover involved. But he keeps going back to that point of carryover, not understanding there's two forms of carryover. Two forms of carryover. And that is the difference between an assistance movement and an accessory movement, right? Carryover type you think of, number one is movement pattern, right? You have a neuromuscular carryover, a movement pattern learning carryover. And this should be pretty simple to understand. A bench press variation, you adjust your grip with, right? You go close grip instead of wide. Will that carry over to your wide grip? Of course it will. It's a similar movement pattern. Let's say you're doing floor presses, or he's calling the dead stop bench. Will it have carryover? Of course it will. It's a similar movement pattern. Movement patterns carry over due to joint angle specificities, neuromuscular efficiency, and skills when your movement is a very, very, very similar movement, right? Carryover type 2 is from accessory work because those are assistance movements, right? That's an assistance movement. It's a similar movement pattern. Accessories build muscles. So you're looking at movement pattern versus hypertrophy. Accessory movements are exercises that create carryover through building muscle mass because a bigger muscle is a stronger muscle. And anyone who tells you otherwise is a moron, is an ignorant ass moron who doesn't understand basic exercise science and doesn't even have common sense. Let's be realistic here. They don't even have common sense because we wouldn't be having this topic at all if people weren't abusing excessive amounts of drugs, and there's good studies on that. Even Greg Nuckols released some stuff on that showing drugs have the ability, in a dose-dependent ability, to cause muscles to grow faster than they gain strength, right? But in naturals, you can't do that. It can't be done without drugs, and it can't be done with low doses of drugs either. People who are using small amounts can't achieve it either. All right, so we wouldn't be having this conversation at all. Bigger muscle's a stronger muscle. Do pulls involve the traps and the lats? Does any form of deadlift involve the traps and lats? Yes, absolutely. Anyone who says the lats are not one of the primary movers in a deadlift has never looked at a single EMG study in their life. It's an important exercise. The traps involved in deadlift? Yes. Do both of those muscles get extremely significant, particularly the middle traps, which is what's used even more in the deadlift? Middle traps and lats get an enormous amount of stimulation on weighted pull-ups. You bet they do. Are those important muscles for deadlifting? Yes, they are. Should they have some carryover? Of course they should. Now, the point we need to look at here. People say, where are you going with this? Well, here's where we're going with it. Alex doesn't use his lower body to the same degree, and even his spinal erectors to the same degree that anyone else does with the style of pulling that he does. Why? Because he doesn't deadlift. Alex is not a strong deadlifter. I don't think his deadlift is more than about 500 pounds, right? It's not. Let's be realistic here. He's short. Even his rack pulls, he even de-emphasizes the middle traps on the way he does rack pulls. He de-emphasizes the legs on the way he does rack pulls. And at least hamstrings and posterior chain. Every lift that he does above the floor. Almost all of his pulls. So he keeps talking about, well, I compared this lift and that, and I didn't lose strength. Well, why would you? Why would you? The leg involvement is actually really, really low. He always does these wider stances, and there is some hip movement happening there, and there is some knee movement happening, but you need to look there at extremely high angles. In other words, they're like eighth squats. All right, most people out there can eighth squat double or triple their 1 rep max. As long as their core can support it, right? They can handle it. So that's a non-issue. You don't need to be able to squat 400 pounds to do block pulls with 600 on a deadlift. It's just not necessary. You don't need the same level of leg strength. They're not even comparable, right? They're not even comparable. So he is way below average height. Alex is 5 to 6 inches below average height. Pretty reasonable evidence out there to that. Again, but I'm assuming off of that. We could all be wrong. We haven't seen his medical records. We could be wrong there. But he appears to be well below average height. He does all his pulls above the floor. You think about the two things. So he's already coming down lower, then he's bringing the weight up higher. He's de-emphasizing the posterior chain. In fact, because he does all of them upright completely, for a partial, he even de-emphasizes the spinal erectors. So do conventional exercises that we would do to carry over to the deadlift, would they be necessary to carry over to what he does? Of course not. Of course not. If you have a strong core and you have a strong upper and middle back, that's what's going to carry over to the type of pulling that he generally does. He's not actually really doing real deadlifts. So when he's saying, well, this carried over well and I was surprised, well, it shouldn't surprise you. Look at what you do versus what people do who actually deadlift. They're not comparable. You know, he tries to bring Calor Woolham into it. Calor Woolham deadlifts. Calor Woolham deadlifts. You don't. What are you talking about? What you're going to find is that a lot of the things that you do that might carry over really good to your partials, shorter guy doing partials, may not carry over to heavy pulls off the floor. They may not carry over to a conventional deadlift. Not as much. There'll be some because you are hypertrophying those muscles. That counts. It will help. But it may not be as tremendous from a motor pattern perspective and even a hypertrophy perspective, because a lot of the muscles that you need to break a heavy weight off the floor are not being hypertrophied. A lot of stuff in the lower body. The upper body stuff is fine because what he does is purely upper body. And I'm not going to get into that whole argument again of why it's not even best for upper body. Totally different argument. But when he's talking about the carryover, this is no surprise to me. But I will go so far as to say that a pull-up can absolutely still be an accessory movement for a conventional deadlift from the floor also. I think there can be some carryover. Absolutely can be. And I think there is, as long as something else further down isn't tremendously the weakest link by a large margin, right? As long as that's not the case, it will even have carryover there. So in short, do your pull-ups. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.